Oh, I can still use my phone. Because I did have things on the phone. Actually, I never thought of a name for this. I had a couple of ideas. Some of them are hilarious. You ever heard of, like, the word turnt?
Turnt?
Yes.
No.
It basically means it's like wild and crazy. Have you heard of AF?
Well, that's Air Force.
Technically, yes. It's also like as F. So some people say like it's like turnt AF to say like a party's really wild and crazy. So I was considering calling it learnt AF. And then
that would be an inside joke, but
well, yeah. I'm probably not going to call it that because it's funnier to me, and no one else has thought it's funny.
you'd have to know what some of that stuff is, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean the other stuff would be like breaking bread, or basically so just kind of figures of speech. So I know breaking bread is one. Hadn't really thought of other ones. I did think of other ones, but they're not coming to mind immediately. Ooh, actually, okay, seven. We'll do like a 7:45 start. So we're going with like 50 minutes from that, like 8
o'clock.
There you go, 15 minutes. It probably like 8:35. You know, just occupying time at that point.
Yeah.
But all right, so I guess we're to mainly discuss primarily things that we disagree with, because that seems more interesting than things that we agree with. But you got my list of topics.
Yes, I didn't work down them extensively. Are we online, by the way?
No.
Oh, okay. What? I mean, do you want me to tell you anything? What I'm thinking? Would be fun to do? I think.
Really?
Or do
yeah.
you just
Anything?
Want to do it all
online?
Like, I mean, I can tell you, or do you want to start it and then we just talk on spontaneously?
Technically, the average goal is just to spontaneously talk.
Well, then we can start, since at least it'll get us going, and I can
right.
explain what it seems like I would like to do.
All right.
So we started?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I pushed record. I mean, it's not live or anything, but it's recording.
Okay. So, my take...
Oh, wait, you should probably wear the...
Oh, yeah.
I just realized that's the point of the headphones. It seems good so far from my end.
Okay. So with respect to this list of things, my take on what's happening in the world today is fake news, primarily. They used to call that spin, but where it's gotten so bad that the spin is actually upside down,
right.
It becomes fake.
It's just completely inaccurate.
Completely
it's not even
inaccurate.
Biased at this point.
So my perspective of the news should be where they focus on what I'm going to call truth. People have different opinions, but the truth or the facts should be the same. So that's the famous thing. People should have their own opinions, but not their own facts. It's gotten to where everybody has their own facts, especially in the news. So in my view, the news should be trying to separate fact from fiction. So that's where we go. So in the world of this fake news, yesterday, while riding my bike with the church guys, and talking with some of them, I got this idea from calculus where you kind of come with, I'm going to say, a better perspective of what's happening with different derivatives. So you take, for example, the first derivative of position is speed. The second derivative position is acceleration. the third derivative is what they call jerk, and it's kind of funny, but that's just. It's also the second derivative of speed, but
right. Technically velocity.
Velocity.
If we're really getting into the calculus of it.
So, but here's this: what it seems that there's such a divergent worldview that people can take the same facts and come up with wildly different opinions. So that I envisioned this chart where you'd have something like the polynomial or whatever, which would be the basic things, which would be like fluff arguments that people can talk at each other infinitely and just never communicate because they have a different worldview.
I mean, at that point, they're probably even just listening so that they can talk next. They're not even listening to the actual thing the person's saying.
Right, but the reason that they don't ever connect is it's inconceivable to them what's being said.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to do is pare back closer to what would be truth. And so going through some of these things, constructing this chart, using, for example, abortion, what I think would be constructive was to try to identify what like the position would be, what the first derivative, what the second derivative, and what even maybe a third might be, which would be kind of the core elements that seems to be the most productive if we were going to argue.
Yeah.
Or debate. So the only one I've worked out is abortion because that was the first one on your list. So, for example, we're using this, position calculus thing. Since you're an engineer, I would say that the top level fluff that just there's no would be like choice or women's rights, and that's completely disconnect because for someone that believes in God, you can't say you're for women's rights when half the people you kill are women. There's a completely disconnect.
It's more of like women who are alive.
Well,
it's even the women who can actually talk about it. It's their
vote.
rights.
See, or vote.
Or
See,
vote. Right, vote. That's probably more important.
This is where I'm using this as my example. This is the only one I've got. So I'm going to call what's the position? That's the choice, rights, things, and no one's ever going to come to any conclusion on that. If you take what I'm going to call like the first derivative, it would be, well, when does life start? If life... so let's get down. When does life start? Does life start at conception? Does the life start, when does it start? This isn't completely worked out. But for example, in this case, you'd get down to some sort of viability thing. So let's say life would really only start when it becomes viable. So let's say, what's that? It's probably not 6. At 6, you're not viable. So maybe
if you're 6 years old.
6 years old, yeah, you die. You wouldn't live very long if you.
Yeah, I feel like it's pretty modern for 6-year-olds to not die.
Not if they're not taken care of.
Right, like modern medicine, where it was like previously.
Well, but that means
there was a huge
got
infant mortality rate.
At a 6-year-old, you have to be taken care of.
Right.
Yeah, you haven't even gone to school. You haven't worked. You don't have your own things. You can't pay your rent, buy your own food.
Right. It's not even possible at that point.
The only way that at 6 you could be viable is if you're taken care of.
So viable in this sense would mean like a contributing member of society.
Well, to be to live. Right. So now at 10 years old, you probably could go get a job. You probably could figure out
a job at 10.
No, you can't when you're 23. But at 10, you probably...
If 10-year-olds are out there getting jobs, like, I'm doing something wrong.
So here's the window, maybe 12 or whatever it is.
Of course, 12.
So that means, for example, you could kill any kid if you had a bad day up till 12.
Yeah. It's really... I haven't been able to come up with any actual hard line to make a distinction with.
So, but my thought in this framework is that, okay, now we're not just talking, rights, which is neither side's going to even understand each other. But when does life start? And I put this here because it seems like science has come to the conclusion that life begins at conception. That's when it starts. After
what is
that,
the science?
Yeah.
I guess, what does that mean particularly? Because I've heard the concept of life begins at conception, but I haven't heard really where it came from.
Well, that comes down to viability, I think. So as if I was filling this chart out.
Like it has the potential to be a human being.
President of the United States.
As soon as, I guess, sure. But it has the potential to become a human being with independence.
Well, see, I would say it already...
Once it is fertile.
Already a human being, it's not independent. Now, I do know some 23-year-olds that are not yet independent.
Yeah, not to... Shots
the,
fired a little bit.
The thought here is, now let's look at when it's viable. Is it at birth, after the first breath, after you spank them once, after you really want to kill them? Or 12 years old, or, somewhere between conception and birth. Anywhere along that continuum, if loved, taken care of, cherished, fed, they are viable and could become the next president of the United States.
And I feel like the interesting thing too is if there seems to be a dichotomy where if a mother doesn't want the actual child, then it's worthless. But it has immeasurable worth if she actually does want it.
Right.
I believe if you actually murdered a pregnant woman, that's double homicide. And it has to be alive
but
if it's double homicide.
Mom kills it, and that's wonderful.
And I would say even the tough part is, I've heard a lot where it's, what's the difference between a baby in the womb and like the second it's delivered? And I feel like I don't know what the difference is. So if there's a policy that applies to a baby in the womb, it should apply to a newly born baby as well.
Right. What I've read is that they call it position.
Position?
Or something like that. So if it's in the womb, it's not born.
Right.
2 minutes later, it's
by
out.
definition, I guess.
What's the difference of the baby? Nothing.
Yeah, practically, I would say nothing.
Right. So to say that it's up to the mom or some position, that's goofy. Yeah.
At most, I would say that if it is actually delivered, then under no circumstances can it be considered her body. So if it's actually delivered, it no longer is dependent on her to survive. So, I mean, other than like nurturing the child or something. But so at that point, the argument could no longer apply that it's my body, therefore I can do with it what I want. Because if it's a separate entity that has been delivered and doesn't... Effectively, babies are just kind of like parasites that live inside of you, but they're so cute for some reason.
Well, it's also not her body.
Right, even
because
in the womb.
It's parasitic.
It can't be parasitic if it's part of your body.
It's not her body. So she can do anything she wants to her body, but that's not her body. That's a separate person. That comes to when does personability happen. And that's a debatable thought.
Right, like the status of personhood.
Right. So now, to finish my little chart here, somewhere at the bottom is whether you believe in God. And that's a key point. Because if you believe that you are here because God envisioned you before the beginning of the world,
Gotcha.
You have personhood because God loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life. That gives you purpose, gives you meaning, and all those things. Completely unrelated to mom.
Right, the
or mom and dad.
regardless of any other person.
Right. Personhood.
I guess if you were conceived, then you have a soul.
Right.
And actually, at that juncture, what happens to the, I guess, immortal soul of an aborted child?
That's above my pay grade.
Okay. Is that, yeah, that kind of... For me, I found that the big ethical dilemma is how exactly do you justify that... Or one, if you say it's simply, a tissue, then who cares? Do whatever you want with it.
Right.
But I have a hard time justifying that in a rigorous philosophical sense, because, I mean, what makes me feel a little bit more comfortable is to effectively say that it's amoral, and for something that doesn't have rights, if it doesn't have a right to life, then whether it lives or dies is an amoral concept. So making a decision that is convenient for the mother or the father is not reflective of anything, because whether the baby is born or not is kind of irrelevant. See, as long as it does not have a right to life.
Well, what establishes the right to life?
That's the harder part. I would say, personally, the ability to be a member of society. Because we don't need to be in a society. That's supposed to be something that we choose to participate in, because it makes the lives of those participating in it better. And if someone is not in your society, you don't have to acknowledge anything with regards to their rights. They're not of your social contract. You owe them nothing.
Well,
it's pretty brutal. But
well, that goes back to viability. So I would say that's a step up, because if you believe in God and you were envisioned before the beginning and foundation of the world, you go down a certain one path. If you don't believe in God and you're responsible to nobody, then it easily say that it's not viable until he can vote. So that's a separate path that converge at the belief in God, which is a whole different thing.
Which in essence is what the existence of a soul is, what creates inherent value in a human, not any potential that they might have to hold a position that's important. It's just, do they have a soul or not? And if they do, there's immeasurable value.
That's exactly correct.
Right.
So that's why in my chart that I'm envisioning, when you get down to the bottom, it comes to, do you believe in God or not? That is the kind of the third derivative or something we're talking about. And if you say there is no God, and therefore I'm not responsible to anybody, and that's fine, you end up with a whole separate path of conclusions. If you believe that there is a God, and because he loves me and has a wonderful plan for my life, I have immeasurable value as a person because God loves me. You end up with a whole different a different set of positions that have to do, what is person saw, when does it start, how do you protect that and stuff.
Although it kind of sounds like that's more of a guarantee than a responsibility of anybody else.
Well, what I'm saying is that if you believe in God, then you would say he's a person because God loves him. If you say there is no God, and I'm not responsible to him or anybody else, or especially this piece of tissue, then you end up with another complete set of conclusions.
Do you think it's possible to not believe in God, but still end up with that this might not be just a set of tissues?
Well, in my opinion, I think that's the difference between an atheist and an agnostic.
But if it doesn't have to do with whether or not they have a soul, is that agnostic?
Well, agnostic is a guy who doesn't believe in God, but is not sure.
I would say personally, I don't identify as agnostic. I would say I'm very much atheistic. I just tend to not care whether or not other people are religious, especially because in a lot of cases, I would say there are many positive communal benefits to being able to identify with a church, being able to share views with other people. And actually, one of the things that I heard recently was that diversity, I guess not even just racially, but general diversity has no inherent advantage unless the people in that diverse group share some kind of common goal. So, in the sense of a church, it could be a very diverse group of people, and the shared goal actually makes it a lot easier for them to connect with each other, regardless of whether or not they have anything in common otherwise. There's something in common that they can actually get to know each other with.
I would completely agree with that. I would expand on that a little bit to say that as a Christian, when you realize that God has forgiven you, then it becomes easy to forgive others. So, now
Sure.
as people, we aren't perfect at that transference, but the whole idea is when you realize what God's done, it doesn't matter how diverse people are, that's irrelevant. You can love them for how you can communicate and what you do together. What's you like to golf, or bowl, or
Right.
you can do things together, having nothing to do with how tall or short or fat or color or whatever.
Right.
So
I think honestly, it ultimately comes down to, can you find some way to relate to each other?
without hating each other.
Well, yes, I would hope you're not relating with each other somehow in a hateful way.
But that's the easy. If you think you're better at playing the violin or whatever it is you do, then it's easy to have superiority complex without the God quotient thing. I mean,
Right. At that point, I feel like a person that would take an elitist stance like that, they're probably just a jerk. It's not even a religious or non-religious thing.
There's a lot of jerks out there.
Yeah, I mean that's the impression I'm getting at least.
Yeah, they're all over.
Which is, I don't know, it's the craziest thing to me to actually see people with opposing views talking to each other. Because when I see that, I'm like, wait, you're not yelling at each other or anything? You're not like, there's no like vehement slurs being thrown around? Because that's weird. That's not normal.
Well, that's actually typical.
It feels typical now. It's weird.
It should be weird, but it's typical now. Where I guess in my mind, when I look at the worldview of people, if somebody has a worldview that is atheistic, I know that they're going to come up with a completely bizarre and upside down perspective.
On like anything?
Yeah, pretty much.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because there's definitely, I would say, one of the biggest things that religions, maybe Christianity, because that's what I have more experience with, but it provides you with a set of premises that you can base other conclusions on. Where one is, of course, like, what is the inherent worth of a human? If you go with a religious perspective, you could just say, well, God loves you. God made you with a plan, and God made you for the purpose of interacting with other people. And it's a almost axiomatic premise that you can use to apply to other, I guess, moral problems. One, obviously, being abortion. But if you take an atheistic viewpoint, you have a much, much harder time finding value in anything that people do or in any qualities that people have. At best, you could say that it's, helpful if someone wants to like donate to charity or they want to be nice to people. There's a practical good in how that helps society. But outside of being able to quantify its effect and say like, oh yeah, this seems to be doing something I can measure that's good, nothing's good or meaningful. Which is how when you end up with, if something, even like a vegetable, a human vegetable, it's like if they can't do anything, then you can't really say that they have value at all. And it's a bit of a black hole, because every time you try to answer, or at least myself, every time I try to answer a question of like what makes this meaningful or valuable, then I end up down a whole new rabbit hole where it's like, okay, well, and a lot of it does, I guess, kind of fall back on scientific principles, where one is what makes a human human, because at some point you're either a human or you're not, which is also possibly up for debate. And at that point, can you stop being a human? One thing that I genuinely don't know the answer to is if you become brain dead. Because at brain death, assuming you're not just in a coma and you're going to wake up, a genuinely brain dead individual, I believe, is considered dead. But they're not physically dead. But do they have rights? I don't know. I don't know if they should have rights. But I feel like just saying anyone under any circumstances doesn't have rights just because of who they are, that sounds kind of messed up. I don't know, I'm conflicted, because it sounds very heartless, but I can't come up with a reason why they should have rights. Like, rights don't exist. They're just something that we make up and agree to respect. Or not agree to respect.
Or agree not to respect.
Right. It's the whole right to free speech. Like, there are no rights. It's just what are we going to agree?
In our construct, we've decided that there should be free speech, and there has been until now. So that if you
and
have
I feel like there's probably been censorship for a long time too.
Well,
maybe public censorship is kind of a new thing. So I'm gonna check the cameras real quick just to make sure this hasn't gone horribly awry.
Censorship, yeah.
All right, this one's still good. All right, this one's...
It fell down. The dog knocked it.
You gotta be kidding me. Did it stop recording? What? It just stopped recording arbitrarily.
Oh, does it? You need to put in the Apple ID?
Honestly, probably. I'm just gonna push record again. Maybe I'll just check it like every 10 minutes or something. It's fine.
Well, as long as mine is working.
It'll just be on your face for 20 minutes straight.
Yeah, it's gonna be great.
Pretty natural.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. Hopefully they get Stewart's dive. That was a fantastic dive trip.
I guess I could switch from your face to the very important things going on the screen here.
Hi.
There you go.
Very good.
Important information. People need to know this.
All right. So where were we before we got distracted?
This setup is so hard. The technical aspect is just a nightmare.
Yeah. Well, it clearly has gotten Rudy up. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what I have against. I mean, I know exactly what I have against Rudy. I mean, I remember even when he was a little dog, you pet him, and then the smell would be on your hand for like the next week. And so now I just refuse. I refuse to touch him because he's a smelly dog.
Yeah, I got him on this hand. But do you see what I have on my finger? Yeah, it's getting worse.
I'm not sure. Can it not bend? It won't go straight.
It actually bends. I can hold and stuff, but it just won't straighten out.
That's weird. Can you can you put it down on like a table and force it?
No, I tried that a while back, but it's just something.
Huh.
I went to the doctor last year for my physical, and she said, "Oh, you're a Viking."
That seems like an unhelpful diagnosis.
That happens to the Viking people. Oh, okay. I guess I was I always liked the water. So,
I don't know. I feel like your pillaging reputation has been pretty weak lately, though.
Yeah, I like to sleep in.
It's like, gosh, I'd really like to just pillage this village, but it's so early.
It's too early. Yeah, that's a thing. All right, so I can't even remember.
What was the last thing? I feel like last thing I remember saying was, if you assume a rigorously atheistic viewpoint, then there's nothing giving meaning to anything. So having to quantify anything as valuable becomes a really big problem, which becomes, it's seemingly impossible to resolve when the thing you are trying to quantify the value of can't say, hey, I have value, by the way. So if you're literally just trying to speak for something that literally can do nothing, then I can't say that it has value because it doesn't appear to.
Well, I have really no comment to that because in the years past, somebody like that would have just died.
What?
Well, I mean, somebody that had gotten brain dead or something when some problem had happened, they would just die. Your stepmom, she just died of pancreatic cancer.
Is that Grandma Miriam?
Yeah.
That's a stepmom? Wait, what?
Your stepmom. Yeah. Oh, no, your step-grandma.
Oh, okay.
My stepmom. Grandma.
It's like something's not adding up here.
One more step.
There you go.
And years ago, I mean, they would have said she just died of a broken heart or something.
That much more romantic that way.
Yeah.
Saying pancreatic cancer is a lot less cool.
Yeah. it hit fast. So she was doing great until all of a sudden, she started getting a pain and they found it and it was 4th stage or whatever, all that stuff. And within, 8-9 months, she was gone. So what was that? We're going having to do with if you have little value, you just don't. So
I mean, that's even tougher. It's like your value comes from people being able to care about you.
Right. So scientifically, they can keep you alive and stuff, and that's can be wonderful as long as you have the money or the insurance or something.
Yeah.
Once that runs out, and you have no ability to continue life. If someone dies, then that's what would have happened a long time ago. Yeah.
Oh man. And I
think I'm a little harder on that with suicide, although I'm kind of a libertarian
really
about that. One. But this is your assisted suicide things.
It's like the right to die.
The right to die. If, for example, that you found your worth in God, then you would want to serve him until he pulls the plug. You'd have the last time, whatever it was, wasn't for you to be happy, but for you to be a soldier.
Right. I mean, yeah, I guess that's the point.
So when you look at assisted suicide, or what would you call it? Yeah.
The right to die?
The right to die. I mean, so in my somewhat libertarian view, they can do anything they want.
I feel like a lot of people say the word libertarian, and I've never really looked it up.
Well, what libertarian means is that anybody can do anything they want at any time. Just leave me alone. That's kind of the essence of libertarianism. So to some extent, for example,
that camera. I think in the mirror I see that's black and it shouldn't be. So I feel like
see now you can look at.
I feel like
it is
stopped recording. Of course, this is still fun. What is this?
That's yours though, right?
Yeah. Why
so what's
does it
that?
keep doing this?
Well, put in the.
There is not enough available storage to record video. Okay. I don't know what to do anymore.
But mine's going.
You only really need like one person.
I think you should end with more storage.
I gotta use my own stuff. It's what I gotta do. I hate this so much. I don't even know what to do anymore. I guess, I don't know. I'll see if I can just, like, do it right now.
Just delete something. Delete the first half of this.
There you go. There's so many factors to take into account. And this thing's going to ask me every 4 seconds. No, less than 4 seconds.
Well, don't you know what the idea is?
No. And what? And
but
I don't know why I need
that's
it.
yours. That's yours, right?
No, this one's mine.
Oh, whose is that one?
This is Mom's. You know what? If I'm not using this one, I just Yes, I know I have storage on this.
Oh, so this is Mom's little one?
Yeah. That's the Mom's iPad mini.
Yeah, I took that to the Bahamas because I was going to Wi-Fi up from all the camera Wi-Fi setup, and never got it to work.
So I'm just gonna finish a card.
Yeah.
I hate where this has gone. I mean, that's the tech side, at least. 'Cause that's the thing. You can't like redo it. Yeah, it's fine. I'm enough in the frame.
Yeah, just duck down just a little bit.
Although, at least perfect. I like that there was the mirror though, because I could like actually look in the mirror and see like, is the screen black? Because if it is, there's something wrong. Oh wait, that's showing up. No, I didn't even do that on purpose. I object. No, okay. I feel like that's
you do with the light just a little bit, but I don't know if that makes a difference.
I'll lower it slightly.
Perfect. So now you don't have the light in there.
Why is this still airplaying? Nope. Yeah, I can stop mirroring that. Pretty sure the mirroring is just going to be unnecessary bandwidth. I guess I didn't do anything important with this, but I'll just save it. I'll see how long that takes. Still recording on this end.
Okay.
Well, definitely for future reference, tripods. That's
probably
camera tripods. It actually, I haven't heard any problems so far, but I would like the mics to be higher.
Well, these I can hear fine. You don't have to have them. You wouldn't need them higher.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it very well might be fine, but definitely for this, like, yeah, like I don't like that I can hear that, but otherwise I'd have to talk really close into it, and it doesn't feel natural. But this whole thing is an experiment.
Yeah, I would say that it's going. Yeah. I don't know if it's going well, but it's going. Yeah.
Plus, there's still the part of me that's like really nauseous, but so far that's been adequate. Yeah.
Well, you're tough. You could just do it.
Yeah.
Because tomorrow morning at 8:00, you should be there, right, and get your stuff.
Yeah. Well, the tough part's gonna be sleeping.
Well, don't sleep past 8. Sleep in your car.
What? I mean, I can just walk to the building.
And yeah, you need to park your car in front of somebody else because we still need to get the registration.
The registration. Oh yeah, I haven't gotten a ticket for that actually.
Well, you did.
Surprising. Well, yes, I guess recently. I know there's a whole problem. Okay, it's not like a problem, but I think it's a problem because it's inconvenient to me. But there's no one at the house wants to get blocked by someone parking behind them. But then that means you just end up with 6 lanes where no one's pulled forward. It's like, well, now you've cut the number of parking spaces in half. and you're jerks. That's the problem here. I'm angry about it. I'm a grumpy person.
Yeah.
Which is weird because it's actually kind of fun
To be grumpy?
to be grumpy because it's funny.
Well, it worked in the Alice in Wonderland, wasn't it?
Alice in Wonderland, that's a movie?
No, it was the all the dwarfs.
Oh, yeah.
Not Goldilocks.
I know of Snow White and the Seven
And the
Dwarfs.
Seven Dwarfs.
Yeah.
One of them was dopey and grumpy and hungry and Scott.
There you go. I haven't seen the movie, but I've heard that sounds
Heard that was in
correct.
there. Yeah, it's a thing. Okay.
Man, I forgot what I remember saying the whole if no one can if a person cannot demonstrate value, then they have no value because that's something that must be measured. So if a person
Well, who said it must be?
I would say from an atheistic standpoint, you can only be judged by the outcome of your actions. So if you can't make actions, you effectively affect nothing. So you would change nothing if you didn't exist. With the caveat, of course, that you can still affect people by people caring about you. So even if you might be a vegetable, I would say maybe you still don't have a right to life in that case, but you still affect people because people care about your well-being, and maybe your family comes by and, I don't know, people give sermons about you or something. But your absence would affect something. So in that sense, even though you're doing nothing, you are demonstrating some kind of value.
Right, to people.
Right.
So in my little chart view here, my thought of worldview, if you believe in God or don't believe in God, you end up with a different conclusion. So if you think that God envisioned you before the beginning of the world and has a great plan for your life, even if you are enabled to do anything measurable to someone else around you, you still are immeasurably loved. So you come to a different conclusion than an atheist on the basis of whether you believe in God or not. So if I talk to an atheist and they said, well, there's no value, I wouldn't get excited, really, because I would understand that from an atheist view, that would be a logical conclusion.
Is it not like the typical conclusion? Not
Well,
that I've really discussed it with many people.
If you believe in God, the typical conclusion is that you have worth because you're loved by God.
Right. You're effectively given worth.
Right.
You don't need to prove worth.
Right. Your worth comes from God, not from your action.
Right. Which is a lot nicer. It's a lot less cutthroat.
Yeah. There you go. See, that stands on its own.
Right. Frankly, probably the only reason we even have a society is because people tend to empathize very strongly with others. I mean, there's a whole... That's a whole other rabbit hole where there's actually... the movie Black Panther? It came out maybe a year or two ago.
Oh, yeah, no, I didn't see it.
The central conflict in the movie is that there was a highly technologically advanced society in like the middle of Africa, and they were incredibly prosperous, but I think it was like there were a bunch of places around the world that were still in poverty, and they didn't lift a finger to help anybody. And so the main characters from it was called Wakanda, they basically said, like, we need to look after ourselves. That's the point. And the guy that came in, who apparently he was born in Wakanda. Was he born in Wakanda? Well, he was a Wakandan. Yeah. And then he was raised outside of Wakanda. And so he ended up finding his way back, and he said, like, yo, a lot of people are suffering, and you're doing nothing. And I kind of thought, like, do they have a responsibility to help, though? Like, it is kind of true.
Were they the neighbor?
No. I mean, it was like across the world. I think he grew up in America. And it was like a classic, like, you know, I'm not a fan of the way it was portrayed, because the guy kept bringing, like, color into it. It's like there are, you know, millions of people that look just like us that are suffering. Like, sure, there are just millions of people in general suffering, but like, I get what you're trying to say. And then, I don't know, the main reasoning was that the Wakandans were saying is like, we need to protect ourselves. And it's like, yeah. Are you a bad person just because you're not helping people you have never met? I feel like if you are not in some kind of social contract with them, then how can you be obligated to them? Even if it may seem heartless, if there's someone, halfway across the world in poverty, why is it your job to do anything about it if you're trying to survive as well? At what point? And I would say personally, I thought, if it's across the world, then is that close enough? What if it's a different planet? If it's a different galaxy entirely? Where am I drawing the line at what is my responsibility and what isn't?
Who's your neighbor? That's a famous one.
Sure.
In that particular story, Jesus pointed out that your neighbor wasn't even someone that was neighborly. It was someone that was along your path.
That makes sense.
And so it doesn't have to be the neighbor over here, but someone that you come in contact with. So does somebody on the other side of the world, do you come in contact with them?
Well, they didn't. That was the point, was that they kept to themselves.
Interesting enough, just to look at that. I didn't see the movie, but just as as we look to see who our neighbor is, if we have no contact with them, we wouldn't even know that they needed help. So as that movie potentially unfolded, as they found out there were people, they probably were not obligated to use your word. But it could come into awareness that they might be able to help some people in some way.
Which is ultimately what they did.
Probably what they did. One of the stories I heard long ago was somewhat relevant to this, is that there was, in some island somewhere, let's say, a kid noticed that there were millions or thousands of starfish up on the shore after a storm, and he realized that they were all going to die. So he walked down and got one out, threw it in the water, got another one, threw it in the water. Someone saw him and kind of came up and confronted him and said, you know, there's too many here for you to help. You're not going to do anything to this overall problem. And he picked up another one, and he said, it's going to help this one. And threw it in. So that's, I think, the answer that Jesus was saying. You can't help everybody. You think it's too hard.
Right. You can't be so focused on the statistics.
But there may be some way to help some that you come in contact with it. Yeah.
It's ultimately just like do your best or do good where you have the opportunity to.
Right. And if you waste or expend all your resources and help everybody for a minute or two, then you have nothing, and then they get hungry again, and it doesn't really help.
Right. And at that point, it's just shooting yourself in the foot for no particular reason.
Right. So that's, I think, what Jesus was talking about, was you got to help your neighbor. I mean, we have the opportunity to help those that we come in contact with. to the extent we can. So yeah, that's probably how that movie ended, to tell you the truth.
Oh, the movie was
Or
kind of a dark ending.
Well,
The guy that was like really angry about them not helping anyone, he killed himself.
oh, that helped.
There was a whole climactic like fight between him and the Black Panther, and he lost. Black Panther said like, I don't know, you aren't wrong. Like we could be doing more to help other people. Like let's work together. And the guy just said like, I'll never work with you. And I think he just threw himself off a cliff.
Perfect.
It's like, all right, he was angry.
Yeah, very, very helpful. Yeah, he helped. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, his whole plan to like help the world was to use the Wakandan technology to effectively take over the world, and then I don't know, like treat people well. I don't know how that would have solved the problem, but I guess they needed a villain for the movie. I enjoyed that the villain actually kind of had a point, but it kind of got lost in all the murdering. He murdered a lot of people. Like his whole thing was that he had like, like some people will get like, or at least I've heard they get like tattoos of like some
different other tribes or their gang. Yeah.
I've heard like if they're teardrops and you get like another teardrop added for every person that you kill. I feel it's probably outdated at this point, but in the movie, what the dude did was I think he would put some kind of a brand on him and like leave a welt every time he killed someone, and then right before he fought the Black Panther, he like took off his shirt and his entire body was just covered in these marks.
Was this
like
the guy who killed himself?
The guy that killed himself. Like his whole body was just covered in marks, and they called him Killmonger because he was a pretty murderous dude. It was like, this guy's a little too angry to be helpful.
Well, maybe it was a good thing that he chose to help in that way.
Yeah, it was such a shame because he wasn't wrong, but dang it, was he not helpful?
Yeah.
Like I get the only good he did was like at the end of the movie, the Wakandans kind of said like, all right, you kind of had a point. We could be doing something. And that was about it. I mean, he killed himself rather than work with them, so...
Yeah. Well, at least he got another mark.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right, so where are we here?
Oh, actually, technically, it's already been 50 minutes.
Okay, I'm ready.
I mean... yeah, we could cut it whenever, really. I feel like I'm starting to shake a lot.
Sort of at a cutting off spot.
All right. Well, I'll see how the footage all turns out. That's actually recorded the whole time, so it'll just be a lot of you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm feeling good about that. I just wish Rudy was here for more of that.
Yeah, he's really helping.
Yeah. Energetic. Yeah. Got a low energy jib right there.
Basically a cheerleader. The only thing is missing is pom-poms.
Yeah. A little bit of energy. But...
All right. Well, I guess I'll cut it here. Hopefully, it sounds pretty good. I don't know. It was fun, but that was so stressful to set up. It is crazy. Well, I need a better setup.
Yeah, I would say that you need a little more stuff.
And even I think with like a minimal, maybe even $60, I could probably get tripods and like a little arm thing for the mics. Okay, I'll probably skip the microphone adjustment thing in so that I can get a better setup for the cameras. But yeah, either way, it was fun. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I hope this helped.
Yeah. All right. Where's the on? It's somewhere here.
Off.